Long before the bustling metropolis of New York City rose from the waters, its very foundations were sculpted by forces of unimaginable scale. Picture, if you will, a time roughly 20,000 years ago, during the final throes of the last great ice age. Here, where skyscrapers now pierce the clouds, colossal sheets of ice, miles thick, inexorably ground their way southward, pushing before them a vast apron of rock and sediment. This immense glacial activity was not merely a sculptor, it was an architect, carving out the deep, sheltered harbor that would one day become one of the world's most vital ports, and shaping the very islands and landforms we recognize today. The retreating ice left behind a landscape of rolling hills, fertile valleys, and a labyrinthine network of waterways, all fed by the meltwaters of a slowly vanishing frozen world. As the ice receded, a new world emerged, green and teeming with life. Forests of oak, maple, and chestnut trees flourished, providing abundant timber and sustenance. The rivers and estuaries, now free of ice, became rich nurseries for fish, oysters, and clams, while the fertile plains supported a diverse array of wildlife, from deer and bear to wild turkey. It was into this verdant paradise, perhaps as early as 12,000 years ago, that the first human inhabitants arrived. These were the ancestors of the Lenape people, a vibrant indigenous society whose name in their Algonquian language translates to the people or original people. They were not just residents, they were integral to the ecosystem, living in profound harmony with the land and its rhythms. The Lenape understood this territory, which they called Lenapehoking, with an intimacy that modern inhabitants can only begin to imagine. Their domain stretched from the lower Hudson River Valley, across what is now New Jersey, and into eastern Pennsylvania and Delaware. The specific area that would become New York City was known to them as Mannahatta, a name often translated as Island of Many Hills or Island where we are all intoxicated, perhaps referring to the bountiful resources or the swirling currents around its shores. They were skilled hunter-gatherers and horticulturists. Their lives dictated by the turning of the seasons. Spring brought the tapping of maple trees for syrup, the planting of corn, beans, and squash, and the return of migratory fish like herring and shad to the rivers. Summer was a time for tending crops, gathering berries and nuts, and fishing in the abundant waters. Autumn saw the harvest, the hunting of deer and other game, and the preparation for the colder months, while winter was a period for storytelling, crafting, and communal life within their longhouses. Their settlements were typically small, fluid communities, often moving seasonally to take advantage of different resources. Along the shores of Mannahatta, they established temporary camps for fishing and harvesting shellfish, their middens, piles of discarded shells, accumulating over centuries, silent testaments to their sustained presence. Their homes, known as longhouses, were communal dwellings constructed from saplings and bark, capable of housing multiple families. These structures were not merely shelters. They were social hubs, where stories were shared, decisions made, and traditions passed down through generations. The Lenape were not a single, unified tribe in the European sense, but rather a confederation of interconnected groups, each with their own distinct identity, but bound by shared language, customs, and a common spiritual understanding of the world. They organized themselves into three main phratries or clans: the turtle, the turkey, and the wolf, each with its own totem and responsibilities, fostering a complex social fabric. One lesser-known detail about the Lenape is their sophisticated network of trails. These were not just simple paths, they were meticulously maintained, arteries of communication and trade, connecting villages across vast distances. What would later become Broadway, one of New York City's most iconic thoroughfares, actually originated as a Lenape trail, winding its way through the heart of Manhattan, following the natural contours of the land. These trails facilitated the exchange of goods like furs, wampum, beads made from shells used for ceremonial purposes and as a form of currency, and agricultural products, and also served as pathways for diplomacy and intergroup communication. The Lenape were adept at crafting tools from stone, bone, and wood, creating everything from hunting implements and fishing nets to intricate pottery and ceremonial objects. Their canoes, carved from single tree trunks, allowed them to navigate the intricate waterways with ease, connecting them to distant communities and resources. Their spiritual beliefs were deeply interwoven with the natural world. They believed in a great spirit, or creator, who manifested in all living things, and they held profound reverence for the land, water, and animals. Their ceremonies often involved dances, songs, and storytelling, aimed at maintaining balance and showing gratitude for the gifts of the earth. They understood that their existence was entirely dependent on the health of their environment, and they practiced sustainable resource management long before the concept was articulated in modern terms. For instance, they would periodically burn sections of forest to clear underbrush, promote the growth of certain plants, and create open areas for hunting, a practice that actually enhanced biodiversity. However, despite the rich archaeological evidence and the oral traditions passed down through generations, historians still disagree on the precise population numbers of the Lenape in the Manhattan region prior to European contact. Estimates vary widely, from a few thousand to tens of thousands, largely due to the transient nature of their settlements and the devastating impact of European diseases that preceded direct contact in many areas. What is clear is that they were a thriving, adaptable people, living in a land of unparalleled natural abundance. They had a complex system of governance, with sachems, leaders, who gained their authority through wisdom and consensus, rather than hereditary right. Decisions were made communally, through extensive discussion and deliberation, ensuring that the needs of the entire community were considered. The Lenape's relationship with the land was one of stewardship, not ownership in the European sense. They viewed land as something to be used and cared for by the community, not as a commodity to be bought and sold. This fundamental difference in worldview would later lead to profound misunderstandings and tragic consequences when European explorers and settlers arrived on their shores. They lived in a world where the ebb and flow of tides, the migration of birds, and the cycles of plant growth were their calendars and their guides. The air was clean, scented with pine and salt spray, and the waters of the Hudson teemed with life, clear enough to see the sandy bottom in many places. Perhaps these shores whispered stories to the stars, stories of a people living in harmony, before the whispers of a new, unforeseen era began to approach across the vast ocean. If you're enjoying this, make sure to subscribe and leave in the comments the time and place you're listening from. The gentle lapping of waves against the hull of the Half Moon was a sound both familiar and foreign to the crew as they sailed further west, guided by the vision of Henry Hudson. It was the autumn of 1609, and the air carried the crisp scent of unknown lands, a blend of pine and damp earth. Hudson, an Englishman in the employ of the Dutch East India Company, sought a fabled northwest passage to Asia, a shortcut that would unlock untold riches. Instead, his journey led him not to the Orient, but to a vast, shimmering expanse of water that snaked inland, a grand river carving its way through a verdant wilderness. He named it the Mauritius River, though history would forever know it as the Hudson. As the half-moon ventured upstream, past towering palisades and ancient forests ablaze with autumnal colors, the crew encountered the indigenous peoples who had called this land home for millennia. The Lenape, whose name meant the people, lived in harmony with the land. Their villages nestled along the riverbanks, their lives interwoven with the rhythms of hunting, fishing, and cultivating maize. Their birch-bark canoes, swift and silent, glided across the water, carrying traders and messengers, their smoke signals rising like prayers into the vast sky. It was a world of intricate social structures, spiritual beliefs tied deeply to the natural world, and a profound understanding of the seasons. Hudson's initial interactions with the Lenape were a mix of curiosity and caution. Gifts were exchanged, beads and tools from the Europeans for furs and provisions from the Lenape. Yet underlying this nascent diplomacy was a fundamental misunderstanding of land ownership. To the Lenape, land was not a commodity to be bought and sold, but a sacred trust, a living entity to be shared and stewarded. To the Europeans, it was territory to be claimed, resources to be exploited. This fundamental divergence would echo through the centuries, a quiet discord beneath the burgeoning symphony of a new world. The half-moon eventually turned back, its mission for a passage to Asia unfulfilled, but its discovery profound. Hudson's glowing reports of abundant furs, fertile land, and a magnificent harbor reached the ears of Dutch merchants, their imaginations ignited by the prospect of new trade routes and lucrative opportunities. The Netherlands, a burgeoning maritime power, was eager to expand its global reach. The lure of beaver pelts, in particular, was irresistible. European fashion demanded beaver felt hats, and the demand far outstripped the supply from their own continent. The forests of this new land promised an endless bounty. Within a few years, Dutch traders began to frequent the river Hudson had explored, establishing temporary trading posts. These were not yet permanent settlements, but rather seasonal outposts where Europeans bartered with the Lenape for furs. The ships would arrive in spring, load up with pelts, and depart in autumn, leaving behind a few hardy souls to oversee the next season's trade. It was a rough, often solitary existence, punctuated by the arrival of the Lenape and the occasional European vessel. By 1614, the New Netherland Company was granted a monopoly on trade in the region, a testament to the growing interest in this new territory. Fort Nassau, near present-day Albany, was one of the earliest attempts at a more permanent presence, though it proved vulnerable to flooding. The focus, however, gradually shifted south towards the magnificent harbor at the mouth of the Hudson River. This natural deep-water port, protected by islands and offering access to a vast interior, was strategically invaluable. The year 1624 marked a pivotal moment with the arrival of the first permanent Dutch settlers. A group of 30 families, mostly Walloons, French-speaking Protestants from what is now Belgium, arrived on the ship New Netherland. They were not adventurers or gold seekers, but rather farmers and artisans seeking religion, US freedom, and new opportunities in a land far from the religious conflicts plaguing Europe. Some were sent upriver to establish Fort Orange near Albany, while others settled on Noten Island, or Nut Island, now known as Governor's Island, a small patch of land in the harbor. But it was the southern tip of the larger island, known to the Lenape as Mannahatta, Island of Many Hills, that truly captured the Dutch imagination. In 1626, Peter Minuit, the Director General of New Netherland, famously, or perhaps infamously, purchased Mannahatta from the Lenape. The transaction involved goods valued at 60 Dutch guilders, a sum often cited as $24. Historians still debate the true nature of this transaction. Did the Lenape understand sale in the European sense? Or did they believe they were granting shared usage rights, as was their custom? The concept of individual, permanent land ownership was foreign to their worldview. The Dutch, however, certainly believed they had acquired full title, a cornerstone of their claim to the land. With the purchase complete, the Dutch wasted no time in establishing a permanent settlement. They called it New Amsterdam. The name itself was a declaration, a deliberate echo of their bustling, cosmopolitan capital back home. The initial years were challenging. The settlers faced harsh winters, unfamiliar agricultural conditions, and the ever-present challenge of coexisting with the Lenape. Yet, the strategic location of New Amsterdam, at the confluence of the Hudson River and the Atlantic Ocean, quickly made it the heart of the Dutch colony. The nascent settlement was a rough-and-tumble frontier town. Its streets were unpaved, its houses simple, often built with timber and wattle and daub. A defensive palisade, later known as Wall Street, was erected across the island's narrowest point to protect against potential attacks from indigenous tribes or rival European powers. This wall, a humble wooden barrier, would one day give its name to the global financial district that rose in its place. New Amsterdam quickly became a bustling trading post, its harbor teeming with ships from Europe, the Caribbean, and other North American colonies. The primary commodity was still furs, particularly beaver pelts, which were shipped back to the Netherlands to feed the insatiable European demand. But other goods flowed through the port as well: timber, tobacco, and agricultural products from the surrounding farms. The Dutch West India Company, which had taken over the administration of New Netherland, aimed to make the colony profitable, and trade was its lifeblood. What truly set New Amsterdam apart, even in its early days, was its remarkable diversity. Unlike the more homogeneous English colonies to the north and south, New Amsterdam was a melting pot of nationalities and languages. The Dutch, of course, formed the core, but there were also Walloons, Flemings, French Huguenots, Germans, Scandinavians, and even a small community of Sephardic Jews who arrived in 1654, fleeing persecution in Brazil. This made New Amsterdam one of the first truly multicultural settlements in North America. By 1643, it was reported that 18 different languages were spoken in the small town, a testament to its open-door policy and its focus on commerce over religious conformity. This was a stark contrast to the Puritan settlements of New England, where religious uniformity was strictly enforced. The Dutch Reformed Church was the official religion, but other faiths were tolerated, if not always openly embraced. This pragmatic approach to religious freedom, born out of the Netherlands' own history of religious tolerance, attracted a wide array of settlers seeking refuge and opportunity. Perhaps the very nature of a trading post, where the exchange of goods transcended differences in creed, fostered this unique atmosphere. Life in New Amsterdam was characterized by a certain frontier spirit, a blend of ambition and resilience. Taverns, like the Stadhuis, City Hall, which also served as a tavern and inn, were central to social life, where deals were struck, news was exchanged, and spirits were lifted. The Dutch brought with them their customs and traditions. Ice skating on frozen ponds in winter, the celebration of Sinterklaas, the precursor to Santa Claus, and a love for good food and drink. The colony even had its own brewery by 1633, ensuring a steady supply of beer. Despite its commercial success, New Amsterdam was not without its challenges. Governance was often chaotic. Director generals like Willem Kieft and Peter Stuyvesant ruled with an iron fist, but their authority was often challenged by the burghers, the citizens of the town, who demanded more self-governance. Kieft's aggressive policies towards the Lenape led to a devastating war in the 1640s, known as Kieft's War, which nearly destroyed the colony and resulted in significant loss of life on both sides. This conflict highlighted the fragile nature of the peace between settlers and indigenous peoples, and the brutal realities of colonial expansion. Peter Stuyvesant, who arrived in 1647, was a formidable figure, known for his wooden leg, a battle injury, and his autocratic style. He brought a degree of order to the chaotic settlement, building schools, hospitals, and improving infrastructure. He established the first municipal government in 1653, granting New Amsterdam some measure of self-rule, including the right to elect schepens, aldermen, and burgomasters, mayors. He also attempted to enforce moral codes, often clashing with the more liberal tendencies of the diverse populace. His efforts to suppress other religious practices, particularly Quakerism and Judaism, were often met with resistance from the populace and even from the Dutch West India Company itself, which prioritized trade and profit over religious dogma. The colony's growth was steady but not explosive. By the mid-17th century, New Amsterdam was a thriving port, a microcosm of the global trade networks that connected Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Its streets, though muddy, buzzed with the sounds of commerce and the babble of languages. Ships constantly arrived and departed, their masts a forest against the sky. The air was thick with the smell of tar, salt, and exotic spices. Yet beyond the bustling port, the land stretched out, wild and untamed. Farms dotted the landscape, providing food for the growing population. The Dutch established patroonships, vast tracts of land granted to wealthy individuals who promised to settle tenants, a feudal system transplanted to the New World. Kilian van Rensselaer's patroonship, Rensselaerswyck, near Fort Orange, was particularly successful and endured for centuries, a testament to the Dutch influence on the land. The Dutch legacy in New York runs deeper than just street names and architectural styles. Their pragmatic approach to commerce, their embrace of diversity, and their emphasis on religious tolerance laid a foundational layer for the city's future character. The very grid system of Manhattan, though later formalized, began to take shape under Dutch influence, with roads like Broadway following ancient Lenape trails. The distinct character of New York, its relentless energy, its embrace of new arrivals, and its focus on opportunity, can trace its roots back to these early Dutch settlers and their vision for a trading post on the edge of a new world. They built a society not on religious purity or aristocratic lineage, but on the practicalities of trade and the promise of a fresh start, a philosophy that would continue to shape the city long after the Dutch flag was lowered. The air, once thick with the scent of pine and salt, now carried the faint, sweet perfume of blossoming apple trees and the distant bleating of sheep. A quiet transformation had begun, not with the roar of cannons or the clash of swords, but with the rustle of parchment and the measured cadence of diplomatic exchange. It was the year 1664, and the winds of change, which had for so long carried the Dutch flag across the Atlantic, now unfurled the Union Jack over the nascent settlement. Peter Stuyvesant, the formidable Director General, whose wooden leg had so often stomped across the cobbled streets in displays of righteous indignation, found himself in an unenviable position. The English, under the command of Colonel Richard Nicolls, had arrived with a clear mandate from King Charles II to claim the territory for the Duke of York, the king's brother. Stuyvesant, ever the stubborn defender of New Netherland, initially refused to surrender. He paced the ramparts of Fort Amsterdam, his gaze sweeping over the bay where English warships lay anchored, their dark hulls a stark contrast to the familiar blue of the sky. He rallied the burghers, reminding them of their oaths, of the sacrifices made to build this thriving outpost. Yet, the townsfolk, weary of the constant threat of conflict, and perhaps enticed by the promise of continued trade and religious freedom under English rule, were not eager for a fight. They saw the overwhelming strength of the English fleet, the futility of resistance. Petitions, signed by prominent citizens, urged Stuyvesant to yield, to spare the bloodshed and destruction that a siege would undoubtedly bring. It was a moment of profound quietude, a collective breath held, as the fate of a burgeoning city hung in the balance. And so, with a heavy heart, and perhaps a lingering sense of betrayal, Stuyvesant capitulated. On September 8, 1664, the Articles of Capitulation were signed, a remarkably lenient agreement that allowed the Dutch residents to retain their property, their laws, and their religious practices. The transfer of power was, by the standards of the age, remarkably peaceful. The Union Jack was hoisted, and New Amsterdam, the bustling Dutch trading post, was formally renamed New York, in honor of the Duke of York. This peaceful transfer of power, rather than a violent conquest, laid a unique foundation for the city's future, allowing for a continuity of commercial life and cultural traditions that might otherwise have been shattered. It was a pragmatic decision, born of necessity and a surprising degree of mutual respect, that would shape the very fabric of the city for centuries to come. With the English firmly in control, New York began to solidify its role as a key colonial port, a vital artery in the burgeoning British imperial system. The focus remained largely on trade, but the commodities shifted. While furs continued to be important, the English expanded into other markets, particularly the lucrative triangular trade involving rum, molasses, and enslaved Africans. The waterfront, already a hive of activity, grew even busier. Ships from London, Bristol, and the Caribbean docked alongside local sloops, their masts a dense forest against the horizon. Warehouses sprang up, their doors wide to receive barrels of sugar, bolts of cloth, and crates of manufactured goods. The city's strategic location at the mouth of the Hudson River, providing access to the vast interior and its resources, became even more apparent under English administration. It was a natural harbor, deep and protected, a perfect staging ground for commerce and, increasingly, for military endeavors. The English governors, appointed by the Crown, sought to integrate New York more fully into the British mercantile system. Laws were enacted to favor English shipping and goods, sometimes to the chagrin of the local merchants who had grown accustomed to the more open trade policies of the Dutch. Yet the city continued to thrive. Its population, a vibrant mix of Dutch, English, French Huguenots, and enslaved Africans, grew steadily. The English brought with them their legal traditions, establishing a common law system that gradually replaced the Roman Dutch law. They also introduced the concept of a representative assembly, though its powers were often limited and subject to the governor's veto. This nascent form of self-governance, however imperfect, planted seeds of political consciousness among the colonists, a growing awareness of their rights as Englishmen, even across the vast ocean. One lesser-known detail from this period concerns the Duke's Laws, a comprehensive legal code introduced in 1665, shortly after the English takeover. While these laws established many English legal principles, they also retain some surprising elements of Dutch influence, particularly in their provisions for local government and religious toleration. For instance, they allowed for the establishment of various Christian denominations, a more liberal approach than was common in some other English colonies, such as Puritan New England. This blend of legal traditions reflected the pragmatic approach taken by the English to integrate the diverse population of New York without alienating the established Dutch community. It was a testament to the initial policy of peaceful assimilation, designed to ensure stability and continued economic prosperity, rather than impose a strict, unyielding uniformity. The city's growth, however, was not without its complexities and challenges. British imperial ambitions often clashed with the realities of colonial life and the desires of the local populace. The Navigation Acts, designed to ensure that trade flowed primarily through England, were a constant source of friction. Merchants in New York, accustomed to direct trade with other nations, often resorted to smuggling to circumvent these restrictions. This clandestine commerce, though technically illegal, became an ingrained part of the city's economic life, fostering a spirit of independence and a subtle defiance of distant authority. The presence of a standing British army, ostensibly for protection against Native American tribes or rival European powers, also served as a constant reminder of imperial control, sometimes leading to resentment among the colonists who felt burdened by the cost of their upkeep. Moreover, the issue of slavery, which had existed under the Dutch, became more entrenched under English rule. New York became a significant hub in the transatlantic slave trade, with enslaved Africans forming a substantial portion of the city's labor force. They toiled on the docks, in homes, and on farms, their lives a stark contrast to the burgeoning prosperity around them. The city's wealth, in many ways, was built upon their forced labor. This dark chapter of New York's history is often overshadowed by the narratives of trade and governance, but it is an undeniable part of its foundation, shaping its social and economic landscape in profound ways. The cries of the enslaved, though often silenced by history, echoed through the bustling streets and quiet homes. The late 17th and early 18th centuries saw New York navigating a delicate balance between loyalty to the crown and a growing sense of distinct colonial identity. The Glorious Revolution in England in 1688, which saw the overthrow of James II, the former Duke of York, had repercussions across the Atlantic. In New York, this event triggered Leisler's Rebellion, a complex and often misunderstood uprising led by Jacob Leisler, a German merchant. Leisler, claiming to act in support of the new Protestant monarchs, seized control of the government for nearly 2 years, reflecting deep-seated tensions between various factions within the colony, primarily between the established Dutch elite and a rising class of merchants and artisans, many of whom were English or of other non-Dutch backgrounds. Historians still disagree with whether Leisler was a genuine champion of popular rights or an opportunistic demagogue seeking personal power. His eventual execution for treason, ordered by the newly appointed English governor, left a bitter legacy and deepened political divisions within the city for decades. It was a turbulent period, a reminder that the peaceful transfer of power in 1664 had merely laid the groundwork for future political struggles, not eradicated them. Despite these internal squabbles and the looming shadow of imperial control, New York continued its inexorable march towards becoming a major urban center. By the early 18th century, its population had surpassed 7,000, making it one of the largest cities in British North America. The grid pattern of streets, though still rudimentary in many areas, began to take shape, expanding northward from the Battery. Public buildings, like the City Hall on Wall Street, reflected the growing administrative needs of the colony. Churches of various denominations dotted the landscape, a testament to the religious diversity fostered by the English policy of toleration, a legacy of the initial capitulation. Perhaps these early streets, still unpaved and often muddy, whispered stories of the diverse tongues spoken, the clatter of horse-drawn carts, and the distant cries of street vendors, all weaving together the tapestry of a city finding its voice. The English period also saw the formal establishment of institutions that would become cornerstones of the city's identity. In 1693, Trinity Church, an Anglican parish, was chartered, and its spire would soon become a prominent landmark on the skyline, symbolizing the establishment of the Church of England as the official religion, though religious freedom for others largely persisted. King's College, later to become Columbia University, was founded in 1754, marking the beginning of higher education in the city and attracting scholars and students from across the colonies. These institutions, though serving the interests of the British Crown and colonial elite, also fostered intellectual discourse and cultural development, laying the groundwork for New York's future as a center of learning and innovation. As the mid-18th century approached, the complexities of British imperial ambitions began to weigh more heavily on the colonies. The French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, a global conflict between Britain and France, drew New York directly into the larger imperial struggle. The city served as a crucial supply base and staging ground for British troops, further solidifying its strategic importance. The war, while ultimately a British victory, left a significant debt, and Parliament sought to recoup its losses by imposing new taxes on the American colonies. This shift in policy, from a period of salutary neglect, where imperial control was loosely enforced, to a more direct and burdensome intervention, ignited the embers of dissent that had long smoldered beneath the surface of colonial life. The Stamp Act of 1765, which levied a tax on all printed materials, from legal documents to newspapers, provoked widespread outrage in New York. Merchants, lawyers, and printers, whose livelihoods depended on these materials, organized fierce protests. The Sons of Liberty, a radical group, emerged as a powerful force, staging demonstrations and even resorting to violence against those who sought to enforce the act. The Liberty Pole, a symbol of defiance, was erected in the Common, now City Hall Park, only to be repeatedly cut down by British soldiers, and then re-erected by the colonists. These acts of resistance, though seemingly minor skirmishes, were early indicators of a growing chasm between the colonies and the mother country. The once peaceful transfer of power in 1664, celebrated for its pragmatism, now seemed a distant memory as the city grappled with the tightening grip of imperial authority and the burgeoning desire for self-determination. The whispers of independence, once faint, were growing louder, carried on the very winds that had brought the English ships to the harbor over a century before. The murmur of distant drums began to grow louder, a rhythm of change echoing across the Atlantic. By the mid-18th century, New York, a vibrant port city, found itself increasingly entangled in the growing tensions between the American colonies and Great Britain. The Stamp Act of 1765, imposing a direct tax on printed materials, ignited a fierce resistance here, perhaps more so than in other colonial centers. Merchants, lawyers, and ordinary citizens, accustomed to a degree of self-governance and economic liberty, saw this as an infringement on their rights. The Sons of Liberty, a clandestine organization, found fertile ground in New York's taverns and docks, organizing protests and boycotts. They erected liberty poles, symbols of defiance, which the British troops stationed in the city would repeatedly cut down, only for them to be re-erected by determined New Yorkers. These acts of symbolic rebellion escalated into direct confrontations, a prelude to the storm gathering on the horizon. As the decade wore on, the air in New York thickened with a sense of impending conflict. The Boston Tea Party in 1773, while not occurring in New York, resonated deeply within its merchant community, many of whom also engaged in the lucrative tea trade. When news of the battles of Lexington and Concord reached New York in April 1775, the city was plunged into a fervent patriotism, though not without its divisions. Loyalists, many of whom were wealthy merchants, Anglican clergy, or royal officials, still held significant sway, believing that reconciliation with the crown was the wisest path. But the tide of revolutionary fervor was rising. The Continental Congress, meeting in Philadelphia, began to take steps toward independence, and New York, strategically located at the mouth of the Hudson River, became a critical military objective for both sides. The summer of 1776 brought with it a profound shift. On July 9, 1776, after the Declaration of Independence was read aloud to George Washington's troops in New York City, a jubilant crowd pulled down the equestrian statue of King George III, which stood proudly on Bowling Green. The lead from the statue was then melted down to cast some 42,000 musket balls, a potent symbol of the city's commitment to the revolutionary cause. Yet this moment of defiance was quickly followed by a period of immense hardship. General William Howe, commander of the British forces, launched a massive invasion, aiming to seize New York and control the Hudson, thereby splitting the rebellious colonies in two. The Battle of Long Island, fought in August 1776, was a devastating defeat for Washington's Continental Army. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, the American forces suffered heavy casualties, and Washington skillfully executed a miraculous nighttime evacuation across the East River from Brooklyn to Manhattan, saving his army from complete annihilation. The British occupation of New York City began in September 1776 and would last for 7 long years until November 25, 1783. This was the longest occupation of any major American city during the war. Life under British rule was harsh for those who remained, particularly for patriots or those suspected of harboring revolutionary sympathies. Many New Yorkers, fearing British retaliation or simply seeking refuge, fled the city, their homes often confiscated and given to loyalists or British officers. The city became a bustling military headquarters, a supply depot, and a prison. Churches were converted into barracks or riding schools, and the once vibrant harbor was choked with British warships. The economic life of the city, once so robust, was now entirely subservient to the needs of the occupying army. A devastating fire swept through a significant portion of New York City on September 21, 1776, just days after the British occupation began. The blaze, which started in a tavern near Whitehall Slip, consumed an estimated 400 to 500 buildings, roughly a quarter of the city. The exact cause of the fire remains a subject of historical debate. Some historians suggest it was accidental, perhaps due to careless soldiers or refugees. However, many British officials and loyalists at the time believed it was an act of arson committed by American patriots, possibly even ordered by Washington himself, though there's no conclusive evidence to support this. Regardless of its origin, the fire left a vast swathe of the city in ruins, exacerbating the already dire conditions for its inhabitants and further polarizing the sentiments of those who remained. The charred remains of buildings stood as a stark reminder of the war's destructive power, making the landscape of the city a desolate sight for years to come. During the occupation, New York became a refuge for loyalists from other colonies, swelling its population and creating a complex social dynamic. These loyalists, often ostracized in their home communities, sought safety and opportunity under British protection. Yet, even for them, life was not without its difficulties. Resources were strained, and the presence of thousands of soldiers led to inflation and a black market economy. For captured American soldiers, the conditions were far worse. British prison ships anchored in the waters around New York, particularly in Wallabout Bay, modern-day Brooklyn Navy Yard, became notorious for their horrific conditions. Over 11,000 American prisoners of war are estimated to have died on these ships from disease, starvation, and neglect, more than those killed in all the battles of the war combined. The HMS Jersey, known as Hell, was perhaps the most infamous of these floating prisons, a grim testament to the brutality of the conflict. Despite the occupation, pockets of resistance and intelligence gathering continued within the city. Figures like Nathan Hale, though ultimately captured and executed, attempted to gather vital information for Washington. The British, in turn, established an elaborate spy network, attempting to infiltrate American ranks and uncover plots. The war was not just fought on battlefields, but in the shadows, with whispers and coded messages exchanged in dimly lit taverns. The strategic importance of New York meant that both sides poured immense resources into controlling it, making it a constant focal point of the conflict. As the war turned in favor of the Americans, particularly after the decisive victory at Yorktown in 1781, the British occupation of New York began to feel increasingly precarious. The Treaty of Paris, signed in September 1783, officially ended the war, recognizing American independence. For New York, this meant the end of its long occupation. Evacuation Day, November 25, 1783, marked the formal departure of the last British troops from the city. General Washington, after years of fighting, triumphantly re-entered New York City, riding down Broadway to the cheers of a liberated populace. The city, though scarred by war and fire, was finally free. The task of rebuilding and re-establishing civilian government was immense. Many of the buildings destroyed by the fire remained in ruins, and the city's infrastructure was severely damaged. The population had shifted dramatically, with loyalists departing for Canada or England and patriots returning. New York, however, possessed an inherent resilience. Its strategic location, its deep harbor, and the entrepreneurial spirit of its people quickly began to drive its recovery. The city's role in the Revolution, as both a battleground and a symbol of endurance, cemented its place in the nascent American identity. In the immediate aftermath of the war, New York City was chosen as the first capital of the United States under the newly ratified Constitution. From 1785 to 1790, Federal Hall on Wall Street served as the seat of the national government. It was here that George Washington took the oath of office as the first President of the United States on April 30th, 1789, standing on the balcony overlooking a cheering crowd. This period was crucial for shaping the young republic. Debates over the Bill of Rights, the establishment of the National Bank, and the formation of the federal judiciary all took place within New York's burgeoning streets. The city, still recovering from the ravages of war, was now at the very heart of American political life, a testament to its enduring significance. The transition from a colonial outpost to the capital of a new nation was not without its challenges. The city's infrastructure, still recovering from the war, struggled to accommodate the influx of politicians, diplomats, and ambitious citizens. Housing was scarce, and the streets, still largely unpaved, were often muddy and unsanitary. Yet this period also saw a remarkable burst of energy and innovation. Merchants quickly re-established trade routes, and the port once again buzzed with activity. New York's diverse population, a mix of returning patriots, newly arrived immigrants, and those who had endured the occupation, began to forge a shared American identity, distinct from its colonial past. The presence of the federal government attracted a new wave of talent and ambition. Lawyers, financiers, and intellectuals converged on the city, contributing to its intellectual and economic vibrancy. The New York Stock Exchange, though formally established later, had its origins in this period, as merchants and brokers gathered under a buttonwood tree on Wall Street to trade securities. The city was laying the groundwork for its future as a financial powerhouse. However, the decision to move the capital to Philadelphia in 1790, as part of a compromise over the assumption of state debts, was a blow to New York's civic pride. Yet, it proved to be a blessing in disguise. Free from the constant political wrangling of a national capital, New York could now focus entirely on its economic development. The city's leaders, no longer bound by the demands of national governance, could dedicate their energies to fostering trade, infrastructure, and urban growth. This pivot allowed New York to concentrate on what it did best: commerce and innovation, setting the stage for its meteoric rise in the 19th century. The scars of the revolution, both physical and emotional, lingered. The memory of the fire, the prison ships, and the long occupation became part of the city's collective consciousness. Yet these hardships also forged a unique resilience and an independent spirit. New York emerged from the war, not just as a free city, but as a dynamic, ambitious urban center, poised to embrace the opportunities of a new nation. Its past, a tapestry woven with threads of colonial ambition, revolutionary fervor, and the harsh realities of war, had prepared it for a future of unparalleled growth and influence, a future where it would truly become a global city. The foundations of its Republican self-governance were firmly laid, ready to support the towering ambitions that would soon define it. The air itself seemed to hum with a new kind of energy as the 19th century unfurled its ambitious tapestry. The city, once a bustling port of wooden ships and cobbled lanes, now stood on the precipice of an unprecedented transformation, largely spurred by a vision that stretched far beyond its immediate shores. Imagine the sheer audacity of it, to carve a waterway hundreds of miles long through forests and hills, connecting the Atlantic Ocean to the vast freshwater seas of the interior. This was the dream of the Erie Canal, a monumental undertaking that would forever alter the destiny of New York. Construction began in 1817, a colossal endeavor relying mostly on manual labor, picks, shovels, and the brute strength of men and mules. For 8 long years, laborers, many of them Irish immigrants, toiled through swamps and over rocky terrain, battling malaria and harsh winters. They dug through solid rock, built intricate locks to lift boats over elevation changes, and constructed aqueducts to carry the canal over rivers. The scale of it was almost unimaginable for its time, a testament to human perseverance and ingenuity. When the canal finally opened in October 1825, the celebration was legendary. A flotilla of boats, led by Governor DeWitt Clinton aboard the Seneca Chief, departed from Buffalo, making its way eastward. Upon reaching New York Harbor, Clinton ceremoniously poured a keg of Lake Erie water into the Atlantic, symbolizing the marriage of the waters. This ribbon of water, stretching 363 miles from Buffalo to Albany, then continuing down the Hudson River to New York City, was more than just a ditch. It was a lifeline. Suddenly, the agricultural bounty of the American heartland, grains, timber, furs, could be transported cheaply and efficiently to the bustling markets of New York. Before the canal, shipping a ton of goods from Buffalo to New York City cost around $100 and took weeks. After its completion, the cost plummeted to about $10 and the journey time was drastically cut. This dramatic reduction in transportation costs and time had an immediate and profound effect. New York City, already a significant port, now became the undisputed commercial capital of the nation, the primary gateway for goods flowing both in and out of the burgeoning American interior. The canal cemented New York's position as the empire state, its economic dominance radiating outward. The economic boom fueled by the canal acted like a powerful magnet, drawing people from all corners of the globe. Waves of immigration, particularly from Ireland and Germany, began to swell the city's population. The Great Famine in Ireland in the mid-1840s, for instance, led to a massive exodus, with hundreds of thousands of Irish immigrants arriving in New York, seeking refuge and opportunity. They often settled in crowded tenements, finding work on the docks, in construction, or in the burgeoning factories. German immigrants, many fleeing political unrest, also arrived in significant numbers, often bringing skilled trades and contributing to the city's diverse cultural fabric. By 1850, New York City's population had soared to over 500,000, making it one of the largest cities in the world. This rapid influx of people, while a testament to the city's allure, also presented immense challenges, leading to overcrowding, sanitation issues, and social tensions. The landscape of the city itself began to transform at an astonishing pace. The modest brick and wooden structures of earlier centuries gave way to more substantial buildings, often constructed of brownstone and iron. The grid plan, laid out in 1811, began to fill in, extending northward from Lower Manhattan. Streets that were once quiet residential lanes now buzzed with horse-drawn omnibuses, delivery wagons, and the constant chatter of commerce. The waterfront, especially along the East River, became a forest of masts, with ships from every nation unloading their cargo and taking on new goods. Warehouses and counting houses sprang up, their sturdy facades reflecting the city's growing wealth. Industrialization, though perhaps not as dominant as in some other American cities, certainly took root in New York. While heavy industry like steel mills was rare, the city became a center for light manufacturing, particularly in textiles, printing, and clothing. The ready availability of labor, thanks to immigration, and the efficient transportation network provided by the canal and port made New York an attractive place for entrepreneurs. Small workshops evolved into larger factories, often powered by steam engines, their rhythmic hum adding to the city's symphony of sounds. The garment industry, in particular, began its long and storied history in New York during this period, laying the groundwork for its future as a global fashion capital. Yet, this era of explosive growth was not without its shadows. The sheer density of people, particularly in the lower wards, led to deplorable living conditions for many. Tenements, often hastily constructed and poorly ventilated, became breeding grounds for disease. Cholera epidemics, like the devastating outbreak of 1832, swept through the city, disproportionately affecting the poorer neighborhoods. The lack of adequate sanitation, clean water, and proper waste disposal posed constant threats to public health. This stark contrast between immense wealth and grinding poverty became a defining characteristic of 19th-century New York, a challenge that would persist for decades. Amidst this rapid expansion, the city also began to develop iconic infrastructure that would define its character for centuries to come. The need for fresh water, a perennial problem, finally led to the construction of the Croton Aqueduct. Completed in 1842, this engineering marvel brought pure water from the Croton River in Westchester County, over 40 miles away, into the city. The opening of the Croton Aqueduct was another moment of grand celebration, with water spouting from fountains in City Hall Park, a symbol of progress and a vital improvement in public health. This reliable water supply was essential for firefighting and sanitation, transforming the daily lives of New Yorkers. Another visionary project of this era was the creation of Central Park. By the mid-19th century, New York was becoming increasingly congested, and civic leaders recognized the need for open green spaces for recreation and respite. The idea of a large public park, inspired by European examples, gained traction. In 1853, the city acquired the land, a rugged and swampy area inhabited by squatters and small communities. A design competition was held, won by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, whose greensward plan envisioned a pastoral landscape of winding paths, rolling meadows, and tranquil lakes. The construction of Central Park, beginning in 1857, was another monumental undertaking, involving thousands of laborers who moved millions of cubic yards of earth, planted countless trees, and created an artificial landscape of breathtaking beauty. It was a radical idea for its time, a vast, democratic space accessible to all, a deliberate antidote to the grime and intensity of urban life. The development of public transportation also gained momentum. Horse-drawn omnibuses, essentially large carriages on fixed routes, became common in the 1830s, offering a more structured way to navigate the growing city. By the 1850s, horse-drawn streetcars running on rails offered a smoother and faster ride, extending the reach of urban development further north. These early forms of mass transit began to reshape residential patterns, allowing people to live further from their workplaces and contributing to the emergence of distinct neighborhoods. One of the fascinating, lesser-known aspects of this period is the role of pigeons. Believe it or not, before the advent of the telegraph, and certainly before telephones, homing pigeons were vital or transmitting urgent commercial news, especially related to shipping and stock prices, between New York City and other East Coast ports. Wealthy merchants and brokers maintained elaborate pigeon lofts on their rooftops, and the arrival of a bird carrying a tiny message could mean the difference between immense profit and ruin. It was a rapid, albeit somewhat unpredictable, form of early communication, highlighting the city's insatiable hunger for information and speed in the burgeoning capitalist economy. Historians still debate the precise balance of factors that contributed to New York's rise to preeminence during the 19th century. Was it primarily the strategic geographic advantage, amplified by the Erie Canal? Or was it the relentless entrepreneurial spirit of its merchants and financiers? Perhaps it was the sheer volume of immigration, providing a constant supply of labor and diverse perspectives. Or could it be the city's unique blend of cultural openness and economic ambition? It's likely a complex interplay of all these elements, each reinforcing the other, creating a powerful synergy that propelled New York forward. The mid-19th century also saw the burgeoning of New York as a cultural center. Broadway began its ascent as a theatrical hub, with grand playhouses attracting audiences eager for entertainment. Newspapers proliferated, offering a diverse range of political opinions and social commentary. Literary figures like Washington Irving and Herman Melville walked its streets, drawing inspiration from its vibrant chaos. Art galleries and museums began to take shape, reflecting a growing civic pride and a desire to cultivate the finer aspects of urban life. As the century progressed, the city's identity solidified. It was a place of relentless energy, a melting pot of cultures, a crucible of ambition. The sounds of construction, the clang of streetcars, the babble of 100 languages, and the incessant roar of the port formed the soundtrack of a city in perpetual motion. The physical landscape was a testament to human will, with buildings reaching higher, bridges spanning wider, and parks offering verdant escapes. New York was no longer just a collection of settlements. It was an organism, breathing and growing, constantly reinventing itself, laying the foundational stones for the colossal metropolis it would become. The seeds of its future skyline, its cultural dominance, and its enduring appeal were all sown in the fertile, often chaotic, soil of the 19th century. As the 19th century began its slow, inevitable turn towards the 20th, a new kind of city began to emerge from the mists of New York Harbor. The echoes of horse-drawn carriages still clattered on cobblestones, but the distant hum of electric trolleys and the nascent roar of elevated trains hinted at a future rushing in. This was the Gilded Age, a period not just of immense wealth, but of unprecedented transformation, where the very fabric of the city was being rewoven with threads of steel, glass, and ambition. The skyline, once dominated by church spires and modest brick buildings, began to reach for the heavens, a testament to human ingenuity and the boundless energy that coursed through the city's veins. The towering structures that began to pierce the clouds were more than just buildings. They were symbols. The Flatiron Building, completed in 1902, with its distinctive triangular shape, seemed to slice through the air at the intersection of Fifth Avenue and Broadway, an early icon of this new architectural age. These were not merely offices or residences. They were monuments to commerce, to industry, and to the burgeoning power of American enterprise. The engineering feats required to construct such edifices were staggering, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. Steel skeletons, a relatively new innovation, allowed for unprecedented heights, while new elevator technologies made these dizzying ascents practical. The very air seemed to crackle with possibility, as if the city itself was inhaling deeply, preparing for a monumental exhalation of progress. Beneath these soaring spires, life on the streets was a vibrant, often chaotic, tapestry of humanity. Immigrants continued to pour into the city, drawn by the promise of opportunity, however slim. They arrived from Southern and Eastern Europe, from Ireland and Italy, from Russia and Poland, each carrying their hopes and dreams in worn suitcases. The Lower East Side, already a crucible of cultures, became even more densely packed, its tenements overflowing with families striving to build new lives. The sounds of 100 different languages mingled in the narrow streets, punctuated by the cries of street vendors and the laughter of children playing stickball. This was a city of stark contrasts. Opulent mansions on Fifth Avenue, where the Astors and Vanderbilts held lavish balls, stood in stark relief to the crowded, often unsanitary conditions of the immigrant neighborhoods. This era also saw the rise of powerful industrialists and financiers, often dubbed robber barons by their critics, who amassed fortunes on an unimaginable scale. Figures like J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie, and John D. Rockefeller, though their primary operations might have been elsewhere, exerted immense influence over New York's financial landscape, shaping its economy and, by extension, the nation's. Their grand homes, often modeled after European palaces, dotted the avenues, a visible manifestation of their wealth and power. Yet alongside this gilded splendor, a growing awareness of social inequality began to stir. Muckraking journalists like Jacob Riis, through his groundbreaking 1890 book, How the Other Half Lives, used photography and vivid prose to expose the squalor and poverty that lurked beneath the city's glittering surface. His stark images of overcrowded tenements, sweatshops, and child labor shocked the conscience of many, sparking a nascent movement for social reform. The Progressive Era, which overlapped with the later years of the Gilded Age, saw a surge of activism aimed at addressing these societal ills. Reformers campaigned for better housing conditions, sanitation, and public health. They fought for safer working environments, an end to child labor, and the establishment of public parks and playgrounds. The settlement house movement, exemplified by the Henry Street Settlement, founded by Lillian Wald in 1893, provided vital services to immigrant communities, offering education, healthcare, and social support. These were not just charitable endeavors. They were efforts to empower marginalized communities and advocate for systemic change. The push for cleaner water, better sewage systems, and improved public transportation began to transform the daily lives of millions, even as the city continued its relentless growth. One of the most significant administrative transformations of this period was the consolidation of the 5 boroughs. For much of its history, New York City had primarily referred to Manhattan. However, as the surrounding areas grew in population and economic importance, the idea of a unified metropolis gained traction. After years of debate and political maneuvering, the Greater New York Act was passed in 1897, officially consolidating the city of New York, Manhattan and the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island into a single massive municipality, effective January 1, 1898. This monumental act created the New York City we largely recognize today, transforming it overnight into one of the largest cities in the world by both population and area. This consolidation was driven by a mix of factors: the desire for more efficient governance, the need to manage shared infrastructure like water supplies and transportation, and the ambition to create a truly global city. Historians still debate the true motivations behind this consolidation, whether it was primarily an act of progressive foresight or a strategic power grab by Manhattan elites to control the surrounding burgeoning areas. Regardless, the impact was profound, laying the administrative groundwork for the city's 20th-century expansion. The advent of new transportation technologies was crucial to this expansion. The elevated train lines, or Ls, which had begun to crisscross Manhattan in the late 19th century, allowed people to live further from their workplaces, contributing to the growth of residential neighborhoods beyond the core. But it was the subway, a marvel of underground engineering, that truly revolutionized urban mobility. The first line of the Interborough Rapid Transit (IRT) subway system opened on October 27, 1904, running from City Hall to 145th Street. The initial ride was a spectacle, with crowds cheering as the electric trains glided through the subterranean tunnels. The subway not only connected distant parts of the consolidated city, making commuting faster and more efficient, but it also spurred development along its routes, transforming farmland into bustling neighborhoods almost overnight. The very rhythm of city life began to quicken, dictated by the relentless pace of the trains. Cultural life also flourished during this period. Broadway, already a vibrant theater district, cemented its reputation as the heart of American entertainment, drawing audiences from across the nation. Vaudeville houses offered a diverse array of acts, from comedians and singers to acrobats and magicians, providing affordable entertainment for the masses. The city's museums and libraries, many of which had been founded in the mid-19th century, expanded their collections and opened their doors to an ever wider public. the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the American Museum of Natural History, and the New York Public Library, with its iconic main branch opening in 1911, became institutions of learning and cultural enrichment, reflecting the city's growing intellectual ambitions. These institutions were often funded by the same wealthy industrialists whose fortunes were built in the Gilded Age, a complex interplay of philanthropy and self-aggrandizement. Yet, for all its progress and grandeur, the city remained a place of stark contrasts and ongoing struggles. Labor unrest was common, as workers fought for better wages, shorter hours, and safer conditions. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911, which killed 146 garment workers, mostly young immigrant women, due to locked doors and inadequate buildings. Fire escapes became a tragic symbol of industrial exploitation and galvanized the labor movement, leading to significant reforms in workplace safety laws. This horrific event cast a long shadow over the glittering promise of the Gilded Age, reminding everyone that progress often came at a steep human cost. The city's political landscape was dominated by Tammany Hall, the Democratic Party political machine, which, under figures like Richard Croker and later Charles F. Murphy, exerted immense power. While often associated with corruption and patronage, Tammany Hall also played a significant role in providing social services and assistance to immigrant communities, helping them navigate the complexities of American life and secure jobs and housing in exchange for their votes. This symbiotic relationship between the machine and the immigrant population was a defining feature of New York politics for decades, illustrating the complex and often morally ambiguous nature of power in a rapidly expanding metropolis. As the second decade of the 20th century unfolded, New York City was firmly established as a global powerhouse. Its financial markets, centered on Wall Street, were increasingly influential. Its port remained a gateway for goods and people from around the world. Its cultural institutions were second to none. The city had grown, not just in size, but in confidence, embodying the American spirit of innovation and relentless striving. The Gilded Age, with its glittering facade and its underlying tensions, had laid the foundation for the modern metropolis. The sounds of construction, the rumble of trains, and the ceaseless chatter of millions of voices formed a symphony of ambition, a powerful overture to the century that lay ahead, a century that would see New York City continue its ascent to unparalleled heights. The very air of the city seemed to hum with a unique energy, a blend of opportunity, struggle, and an unyielding drive forward. Perhaps these soaring structures whispered stories to the stars, tales of human endeavor, of fortunes made and lost, of dreams realized and deferred, all woven into the grand, sprawling narrative of a city that never truly slept. As the shadow of the Great War receded, a new dawn broke over New York, painted in vibrant hues of jazz, flapper dresses, and dizzying financial speculation. The 1920s, christened the Roaring Twenties, brought an unprecedented surge of energy and optimism to the city, transforming it into a global cultural and economic powerhouse. The air crackled with a sense of boundless possibility, a feeling that anything could be achieved, any dream realized, as long as one dared to reach for it. The city's skyline, already impressive, continued its relentless ascent. New skyscrapers, taller and more ornate than any before, pierced the clouds, testaments to American ambition and ingenuity. The Chrysler Building, completed in 1930 with its gleaming Art Deco crown, and the Empire State Building, which rose with astonishing speed in just over a year, becoming the world's tallest building upon its completion in 1931, stood as shimmering beacons of this new era. These architectural marvels weren't just buildings. They were symbols, embodying the era's vertical thrust, its desire to touch the heavens. Beneath these soaring towers, the streets throbbed with a new rhythm. Jazz, born in the South and brought north by the Great Migration, found its most exuberant expression in New York's speakeasies and dance halls. Harlem, in particular, became a crucible of creativity, giving birth to the Harlem Renaissance. Writers like Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston, artists like Aaron Douglas, and musicians like Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong found their voices and their audiences in this vibrant community. Their work explored themes of Black identity, history, and culture, challenging prevailing stereotypes and enriching the American artistic landscape beyond measure. The Cotton Club, though infamous for its segregationist policies, became a legendary venue, drawing both Black and white audiences to witness the electrifying performances of its Black entertainers. Imagine the smoky air, the clinking of illicit glasses, the syncopated rhythms of a trumpet, and the rustle of silk dresses as couples danced the Charleston until dawn. Women, newly empowered by the right to vote and a changing social landscape, shed the restrictive corsets of the past and embraced the freedom of the flapper. Their bobbed hair, short skirts, and independent spirit symbolized a radical departure from Victorian norms. They smoked, they drank, they danced, and they worked, asserting a new agency in public life. The department stores along Fifth Avenue, like Macy's and Saks, became temples of consumerism, overflowing with the latest fashions and gadgets. Catering to a burgeoning middle class with disposable income, the economic boom, fueled by industrial growth, technological innovation, and a burgeoning stock market, seemed unstoppable. Wall Street, the beating heart of American finance, pulsed with frenetic energy. Fortunes were made, seemingly overnight, as ordinary citizens and seasoned investors alike poured their savings into stocks, often on margin, borrowing money to amplify their potential gains. The belief in perpetual prosperity was almost intoxicating. People genuinely believed that the stock market would continue to rise indefinitely, a perpetual motion machine generating wealth for all who dared to invest. Perhaps in their fervent optimism, they overlooked the subtle tremors beneath the surface, the signs of an economy built on increasingly shaky ground. However, this glittering facade of prosperity concealed growing vulnerabilities. Income inequality was rampant, and while many enjoyed unprecedented wealth, a significant portion of the population still struggled. Farmers, particularly in the South and Midwest, faced declining prices and mounting debt. The industrial sector, while booming, also saw increasing mechanization, which, coupled with a lack of robust social safety nets, left many vulnerable to economic downturns. Then, on October 24, 1929, a bomb, day forever etched in history as Black Thursday, the illusion shattered. The stock market, which had been experiencing some volatility, plunged dramatically. Panic ensued. Investors, desperate to salvage what they could, frantically sold their shares. The following Tuesday, October 29th, Black Tuesday, saw an even more catastrophic decline, with the market losing billions of dollars in value. The Roaring Twenties had ended with a deafening crash. The Great Depression, as this economic cataclysm came to be known, plunged New York City and indeed the entire nation into an era of unprecedented hardship. The vibrant energy of the Jazz Age was replaced by a somber quiet, a pervasive sense of fear and uncertainty. The streets, once bustling with confident stride, now saw shuffling feet and downcast eyes. Banks failed across the country, wiping out savings and trust. Businesses closed their doors, leading to mass unemployment. In New York, the unemployment rate soared, reaching as high as 25% by 1932. Men and women, once proud breadwinners, now stood in long breadlines, their dignity chipped away by hunger and despair. Shantytowns, mockingly dubbed Hoovervilles after President Herbert Hoover, sprang up in Central Park and other public spaces, their makeshift shacks a stark contrast to the glittering skyscrapers that loomed nearby. The juxtaposition was heartbreaking. Monuments to ambition standing silent witness to profound human suffering. The city's infrastructure, once a source of pride, began to fray under the strain. Charitable organizations, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of need, struggled to provide food, shelter, and medical care. The city government, grappling with dwindling tax revenues, found itself unable to adequately address the crisis. The optimistic spirit that had defined the 1920s seemed to evaporate, replaced by a pervasive sense of hopelessness. Yet even in the depths of despair, the spirit of New York, its innate resilience, began to stir. The city, known for its ability to adapt and innovate, began to seek solutions. One of the most significant figures to emerge during this period was Robert Moses. Though a controversial figure in later decades, Moses, appointed to various powerful positions during the Depression, became a driving force behind an ambitious program of public works. He believed that large-scale construction projects could provide employment, stimulate the economy, and modernize the city's infrastructure. Under Moses's direction, and with significant federal funding from President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal programs, New York embarked on an extraordinary building spree. Bridges, tunnels, parks, and highways were conceived and constructed, transforming the city's physical landscape and providing much-needed jobs. The Triborough Bridge, a monumental undertaking connecting Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx, was a prime example of these efforts. Its construction, employing thousands of workers, became a symbol of hope and progress. Similarly, the Henry Hudson Parkway and the Grand Central Parkway were built, easing traffic congestion and connecting distant parts of the city. These projects weren't just about infrastructure. They were about restoring dignity. Men who had been unemployed for years found purpose and a paycheck, even if the work was physically demanding. The sounds of jackhammers and roaring machinery replaced the quiet desperation of the breadlines, a new kind of symphony playing out across the city. Beyond the grand public works, the city also saw a surge in cultural initiatives, often supported by the New Deal's Works Progress Administration, WPA. Artists, writers, musicians, and actors, many of whom had been left destitute by the Depression, found employment in projects that aimed to document American life, create public art, and bring culture to the masses. Murals adorned post offices and public buildings. Plays were staged in community theaters, and orchestras performed. Free concerts in parks. These initiatives not only provided livelihoods, but also uplifted spirits, reminding people that beauty and creativity could still flourish even in the darkest of times. The 1939 New York World's Fair, held in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park in Queens, became another powerful symbol of recovery and optimism. With its theme, The World of Tomorrow, the fair showcased technological innovations, futuristic designs, and a vision of a better future. The iconic Trilon and Perisphere, towering structures that served as the fair's centerpiece, embodied this forward-looking spirit. Millions flocked to the fair, finding a much-needed escape from the harsh realities of the Depression and a glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. It was a testament to the city's enduring belief in progress, a collective exhale after years of holding its breath. However, the legacy of these ambitious projects and the figures behind them, particularly Robert Moses, remains a subject of ongoing debate among historians and urban planners. While his efforts undeniably created jobs and modernized the city, Critics argue that his relentless pursuit of large-scale infrastructure often came at the expense of established communities, particularly those of color and lower income. His preference for highways over public transit and his sometimes autocratic methods are still discussed and analyzed today. Did his grand vision ultimately serve the greater good, or did it sow the seeds of future urban challenges? The answer, like so many aspects of history, is complex and multifaceted, depending on whose perspective one considers. As the decade drew to a close, the shadow of another global conflict, World War II, began to loom. While the Depression had been a period of immense suffering, it had also forged a new sense of collective purpose and resilience in New Yorkers. The city, battered but not broken, had learned to adapt, to innovate, and to rebuild. It had faced its greatest economic challenge and emerged, albeit slowly and painfully, with a renewed understanding of its own strength and the enduring power of human connection. The Jazz Age may have ended in a crash, but the city, like a phoenix, was already beginning to rise from the ashes, preparing for the next chapter in its extraordinary story. As the echoes of the Second World War faded across the Atlantic, New York City, unlike many of its European counterparts, emerged not only unscathed, but invigorated. The city had served as an indispensable arsenal of democracy, its factories churning out war materials, its ports dispatching troops and supplies, and its financial institutions underwriting the Allied effort. This period of intense activity had further cemented its economic prowess, and with the world now grappling with reconstruction and a new geopolitical order, New York was poised to assume a central role on the global stage. The war had accelerated a demographic shift, as many who had come for wartime work decided to stay, further enriching the city's already diverse tapestry. In the immediate post-war years, the city pulsed with a renewed energy, a sense of boundless possibility. Skyscrapers, once symbols of pre-Depression ambition, now seemed to embody a future brimming with innovation. The population continued its steady climb, reaching nearly 7.9 million by 1950, a testament to its enduring allure. This was a city where opportunity was perceived to be boundless, where dreams, both modest and grand, could take root. One of the most significant transformations of this era was the city's ascension as a diplomatic capital. In 1946, the newly formed United Nations, an organization born from the ashes of global conflict and dedicated to fostering international cooperation, chose New York as its permanent headquarters. The decision to locate the UN complex along the East River, on land largely donated by John D. Rockefeller Jr., was a powerful symbolic gesture. It signaled New York's commitment to global peace and its willingness to host the intricate dance of international diplomacy. The construction of the UN Secretariat Building, a sleek, modernist glass and steel tower designed by a team of international architects, including Le Corbusier and Oscar Niemeyer, became an instant architectural icon, its clean lines reflecting a hopeful vision of a transparent and unified world. The presence of the United Nations brought a new layer of internationalism to the city, drawing diplomats, journalists, and global citizens from every corner of the earth, further diversifying its linguistic and cultural landscape. Simultaneously, New York was solidifying its position as the undisputed capital of the art world. Paris, long the epicenter of artistic innovation, had been ravaged by war and occupation. Many European artists, fleeing persecution or seeking new opportunities, had found refuge in New York during the 1930s and 40s, bringing with them new ideas and challenging established norms. This influx, combined with a burgeoning American artistic sensibility, led to a revolutionary shift. The 1940s and 50s witnessed the rise of abstract expressionism, an art movement characterized by large-scale, emotionally charged canvases and gestural brushwork. Artists like Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning, and Mark Rothko, many of whom lived and worked in studios across Greenwich Village and downtown Manhattan, challenged traditional notions of painting, emphasizing process and individual expression. Their raw, powerful works captivated the art world, and galleries in New York, particularly those on 57th Street and later in Soho, became the new arbiters of artistic taste. This wasn't merely a change in artistic style. It was a fundamental shift in the global art market, with New York now dictating trends and setting prices. The city's museums, like the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, and the Whitney Museum of American Art, played a crucial role in championing these new movements, solidifying New York's reputation as a dynamic hub for contemporary art. The post-war years also ushered in an era of ambitious urban renewal, often driven by the formidable figure of Robert Moses. Moses, a master builder and urban planner who held an unprecedented array of appointed positions, wielded immense power, shaping the physical landscape of New York more profoundly than perhaps any other individual. His vision was one of efficiency, automobile dominance, and grand public works. He oversaw the construction of numerous highways, bridges, and tunnels, including the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway and the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge, connecting the boroughs and facilitating suburban growth. While these projects undeniably improved transportation infrastructure, they often came at a significant human cost. Entire neighborhoods, particularly those inhabited by low-income and minority communities, were razed to make way for expressways and housing projects. The destruction of vibrant communities like the predominantly Black and Puerto Rican San Juan Hill neighborhood to make way for Lincoln Center remains a contentious aspect of Moses's legacy. Historians still debate whether the benefits of his infrastructure projects outweighed the social disruption and displacement they caused. Was his vision a necessary, if brutal, modernization, or a destructive imposition of a single will on a diverse city? The scars of these projects, both physical and social, can still be observed in the city's fragmented urban fabric. Amidst these grand transformations, the rhythm of daily life in New York continued to evolve. The 1950s saw the rise of television as a dominant form of entertainment, and New York, with its talent pool and production facilities, became a major center for television broadcasting. Shows like The Ed Sullivan Show, broadcast from CBS Studio 50, later renamed The Ed Sullivan Theater, became cultural touchstones, showcasing a dazzling array of musical acts, comedians, and variety performers to a national audience. Broadway, too, continued to flourish, producing a string of iconic musicals and plays that captivated audiences and defined American theatrical excellence. The city's jazz clubs, particularly in Harlem and Greenwich Village, remained vibrant hubs of musical innovation, drawing legendary performers and devoted fans. The influx of diverse populations continued unabated. Puerto Ricans, many seeking economic opportunities, arrived in significant numbers, settling primarily in East Harlem and the South Bronx, establishing vibrant communities and contributing to the city's rich cultural mosaic. The 1950s also saw the beginnings of a significant migration of African Americans from the American South, drawn by the promise of better jobs and a less oppressive racial climate, though they often faced new forms of discrimination in housing and employment. These new arrivals brought with them their traditions, their music, their food, further enriching the city's already unparalleled diversity. The sounds of salsa and bomba began to mingle with the blues and jazz, creating a vibrant, polyphonic urban soundscape. Yet, beneath the glittering facade of prosperity and cultural ascendancy, challenges simmered. The rapid growth and urban renewal projects often exacerbated existing inequalities. While new housing projects were built, they often became isolated enclaves, and the exodus of middle-class families to the burgeoning suburbs began to erode the city's tax base. The dream of a unified modern city, as envisioned by planners like Moses, often clashed with the lived realities of its diverse inhabitants. The seeds of future urban crises, particularly those related to housing, racial tensions, and economic disparity, were being sown even amidst the era's apparent triumphs. Despite these underlying tensions, the mid-century period was undeniably a golden age for New York in many respects. It was a city of unparalleled energy, a magnet for talent and ambition from around the globe. Its financial markets dictated global commerce, its artists set international trends, and its diplomatic halls hosted the fate of nations. The sheer dynamism of the city was palpable, a constant hum of activity, innovation, and human connection. The iconic. See yellow cabs, the steaming grates, the constant rush of pedestrians on crowded sidewalks. These were not just elements of a cityscape, but symbols of a city in perpetual motion, always reinventing itself. The city's architecture continued to evolve, reflecting the prevailing modernist aesthetic. Beyond the UN building, sleek glass and steel towers began to redefine the Manhattan skyline, replacing older, more ornate structures. The Seagram building, completed in 1958, designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, became a paradigm of corporate modernism, its bronze and glass facade exuding an understated elegance and power. These buildings were not just offices, they were statements, embodying the city's confidence and its embrace of a streamlined, forward-looking vision. Even the culinary landscape of the city was undergoing a transformation. While classic delis and Italian-American restaurants remained beloved institutions, new international flavors began to emerge, reflecting the city's growing global connections. The Fos Chinese restaurants, initially catering to Chinese immigrants, began to gain wider popularity, and the aromas of diverse cuisines mingled on the city streets, a subtle but significant indicator of its evolving identity. The post-war era in New York was a period of consolidation and expansion, a time when the city truly came into its own as a global metropolis. It was a place where the world converged, where ideas were exchanged, and where the future seemed to unfold with breathtaking speed. The hum of its engines, the clatter of its subways, the myriad languages spoken on its streets, all contributed to a symphony of urban life that was uniquely New York, a testament to its enduring power as a beacon of opportunity and a crucible of human ambition. The city, having weathered the storms of war and depression, now stood tall, its gaze fixed firmly on a horizon filled with promise and the intricate challenges of a rapidly changing world. The city that had once pulsed with the promise of endless growth found itself, as the final decades of the 20th century unfurled, grappling with shadows it had not anticipated. The vibrant energy that had defined its post-war boom began to fray around the edges, revealing vulnerabilities beneath the glittering surface. The 1970s, in particular, cast a long, difficult pall over New York. A deep fiscal crisis gripped the city, threatening to plunge it into bankruptcy. Essential services, from sanitation to public safety, teetered on the brink. The very streets, once a testament to ambition, now bore the marks of neglect, overflowing garbage bins, crumbling infrastructure, and a palpable sense of unease. Crime rates, already a growing concern, escalated dramatically. The romanticized grit of earlier eras morphed into a harsher, more dangerous reality. Subway cars, once bustling arteries of urban life, became canvases for graffiti and stages for petty crime, deterring commuters and fostering a climate of fear. Iconic neighborhoods, once vibrant hubs of commerce and culture, saw businesses shutter and residents flee to the suburbs, leaving behind vacant storefronts and a sense of abandonment. The city's population, which had soared for decades, began to decline for the first time in its modern history, a stark indicator of the widespread disillusionment. One particularly infamous moment that etched itself into the collective memory of this era was the citywide blackout of July 13, 1977. For 25 hours, the vast metropolis was plunged into darkness, not by design, but by a cascading series of electrical failures. What followed was a night of widespread looting, arson, and vandalism across many neighborhoods, a stark and disturbing manifestation of the underlying social tensions and economic despair that simmered just beneath the surface. The images of burning buildings and shattered storefronts, broadcast globally, further cemented the perception of New York as a city in decline, a place teetering on the edge of chaos. Yet, even in these challenging times, the city's inherent spirit of innovation and resilience refused to be extinguished. Amidst the decay, new forms of artistic expression emerged, often born directly from the urban landscape itself. Graffiti, though a symptom of neglect to some, was also a raw, vibrant art form, transforming subway cars and brick walls into moving galleries. Hip-hop culture, born in the Bronx, began to spread its infectious rhythms and lyrical narratives, giving voice to a generation and laying the groundwork for a global phenomenon. These creative explosions were not despite the city's struggles, but often because of them, providing an outlet, a means of expression, and a source of defiant joy in difficult circumstances. As the 1980s dawned, a slow, arduous process of recovery began. Leadership, both within the city government and among its powerful business communities, recognized the urgent need for change. Fiscal discipline was imposed, often through painful cuts, and efforts were made to restore public confidence. The perception of the city, however, was a stubborn thing to shift. The narrative of a dangerous, dirty, and financially unstable New York persisted, making it difficult to attract investment and retain residents. Then came another profound challenge, one that would redefine social consciousness globally and strike particularly hard at the heart of New York City: the AIDS epidemic. Beginning in the early 1980s, a mysterious and devastating illness began to claim lives, particularly within the gay community, which had found a vibrant, albeit still often marginalized, home in neighborhoods like Greenwich Village and Chelsea. The initial confusion, fear, and lack of understanding surrounding the disease were compounded by societal prejudices. The city, with its dense population and interconnected communities, became an early epicenter of the crisis. The human toll was immense, leaving an indelible scar on generations. Artists, performers, writers, and countless ordinary citizens, many of whom had contributed immeasurably to the city's unique cultural fabric, were lost. Hospitals struggled to cope, and families grappled with grief and stigma. Yet in the face of this profound tragedy, New York also demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for compassion and activism. Grassroots organizations like Gay Men's Health Crisis, GMHC, formed rapidly, driven by volunteers who provided care, information, and advocacy in the absence of adequate government response. ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, founded in New York in 1987, became a powerful and vocal force, employing direct action and protest to demand medical research, affordable treatment, and an end to discrimination. These movements, born of necessity and desperation, not only transformed the response to AIDS, but also laid crucial groundwork for broader LGBTQ+ rights movements. The city's resilience was not just in its infrastructure or economy, but in the fierce solidarity and collective action of its people. Throughout the late 1980s and into the 1990s, the city embarked on a more aggressive campaign of revitalization. A renewed focus on public safety became paramount. Under Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who took office in 1994, the city adopted aggressive policing strategies, famously including the broken windows theory, which posited that cracking down on minor offenses could prevent more serious crimes. While these policies were, and remain, subject to intense debate regarding their effectiveness and social impact, they coincided with a dramatic decline in crime rates across the city. The subway system, once a symbol of urban decay, was cleaned up. Graffiti was removed, and a sense of order began to return. Simultaneously, the city leveraged its unique position as a global financial and cultural hub. Wall Street, despite periodic downturns, continued to be a powerful engine of the national and global economy, attracting talent and capital. The fashion industry, centered in the garment district, maintained its international prominence. Broadway, though it had weathered its own periods of decline, experienced a resurgence, drawing tourists and revenue. Times Square, once a seedy, neon-lit shadow of its former self, underwent a dramatic transformation, with adult entertainment venues replaced by family-friendly attractions, flagship stores, and corporate headquarters. This controversial Disneyfication, as some critics called it, undeniably brought in tourists and investment, albeit at the cost of some of its gritty, independent character. The technology boom of the late 1990s also began to cast its gaze upon New York. While Silicon Valley was the undisputed epicenter, New York's creative energy, diverse talent pool, and established media industries made it an attractive secondary hub. The city's long-standing role as a center for advertising, publishing, and television production began to intertwine with the burgeoning digital landscape, laying the groundwork for its future as a tech powerhouse. Throughout this period, the city's diverse immigrant communities continued to be a vital source of its dynamism. Waves of newcomers from across the globe, from Latin America, Asia, Eastern Europe, and Africa, arrived, bringing with them new languages, cuisines, traditions, and entrepreneurial spirit. They filled jobs, opened businesses, and enriched the cultural tapestry of neighborhoods, often revitalizing areas that had seen better days. This continuous influx of new ideas and energy was and remains a fundamental aspect of New York's enduring ability to reinvent itself. One of the more fascinating, though perhaps lesser known, aspects of this late 20th century resurgence was the quiet but significant role played by the city's parks and public spaces. For years, these green lungs of the city had suffered from underfunding and neglect. Central Park in Pas Reticular had become a dangerous and unkempt place. However, through the efforts of dedicated conservancies and private philanthropy, often spearheaded by individuals who deeply believed in the city's potential, these spaces began to be reclaimed and restored. The Central Park Conservancy, established in 1980, became a model for urban park management, transforming the park from a symbol of urban decay into a pristine, safe, and beloved oasis once more. These restored public spaces provided not just beauty and recreation, but also a psychological boost, signaling a commitment to quality of life and a belief in the city's future. Historians still debate the precise weight of various factors in New York's remarkable turnaround from the brink of bankruptcy and urban decay. Was it the tough-on-crime policies, the burgeoning global economy, the relentless efforts of community activists, or perhaps a combination of all these elements, coupled with the city's inherent, almost stubborn refusal to simply give up? There is no single, simple answer. Perhaps it was the very nature of New York itself, a place built on ambition, reinvention, and the constant flow of new arrivals, that allowed it to weather such storms. The city, like a grand old ship, had taken on water, but its fundamental structure, its deep keel, held firm. By the close of the 20th century, New York City had not only pulled itself back from the precipice, but had begun to shine again, albeit with a different kind of luster. The rough edges were still there, the inequalities persisted, but the overwhelming sense of despair had lifted. The city had proven its extraordinary capacity for resilience, demonstrating that even when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges, fiscal collapse, rampant crime, and a devastating epidemic, its spirit of innovation, its diverse communities, and its sheer will to survive could ultimately prevail. The whispers of decline were replaced by the murmur of revival, setting the stage for a new millennium and new challenges, but also for new triumphs. The city that never truly sleeps had merely paused to catch its breath, ready to embrace whatever the future held. A new millennium dawned over New York City, a shimmering promise of fresh horizons. The city, ever a beacon of progress and innovation, hummed with the quiet confidence of a place that had seen much and overcome more. Skyscrapers continued their ascent, each new tower a testament to ambition and ingenuity, their glass facades reflecting the boundless blue of the sky and the endless energy of the streets below. Technology, once a nascent whisper, now roared through fiber-optic cables, transforming the city into a global hub of information and connectivity. The dot-com boom, though fleeting in its most extravagant form, left an indelible mark, weaving the internet into the very fabric of daily life and commerce. New York, always quick to embrace the future, found itself at the forefront of this digital revolution, its financial markets and creative industries leveraging these new tools to reach an ever wider world. Yet this optimistic dawn was shattered on a clear September morning in 2001. The attacks of 9/11 irrevocably altered the city's skyline, and for a time, its very spirit. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, once proud sentinels of Lower Manhattan, crumbled into dust and memory. The scale of the tragedy was immense, touching every corner of the city and sending ripples of grief and shock across the globe. In the immediate aftermath, a profound silence fell over the usually boisterous metropolis, broken only by the wail of sirens and the somber tolling of bells. Yet from the ashes of that day, a different kind of strength emerged. New Yorkers, known for their resilience and often perceived as aloof, came together with an outpouring of compassion and mutual support that surprised even themselves. Volunteers flocked to Ground Zero, offering aid, comfort, and a shared sense of purpose. The world watched, perhaps for the first time, the true heart of New York, not just its towering ambition, but its deep wellspring of community and courage. The rebuilding process, both physical and emotional, was long and arduous. The gaping wound in the skyline remained for years, a poignant reminder. But slowly, meticulously, a new complex began to rise, One World Trade Center, soaring to a symbolic 1,776 feet, became a powerful symbol of defiance and renewal, its spire reaching towards the heavens as a testament to the city's enduring spirit. In the years that followed, New York continued its dynamic evolution, navigating a complex global landscape. The city's identity as a melting pot deepened further, with new waves of immigration enriching its cultural tapestry. Neighborhoods continued their organic transformation, reflecting shifting demographics and economic forces. Brooklyn, in particular, experienced a remarkable renaissance, evolving from a collection of distinct working-class enclaves into a vibrant, diverse borough renowned for its artistic communities, culinary innovation, and distinct cultural identity. Areas like Williamsburg and Dumbo, once industrial or overlooked, became sought-after destinations, their historic warehouses and brownstones reimagined as loft apartments, art galleries, and trendy eateries. This shift, however, also brought challenges, including rising housing costs and gentrification, issues that sparked ongoing debates about affordability and the preservation of neighborhood character. Technological innovation continued its relentless march, reshaping how New Yorkers lived, worked, and connected. The ubiquitous smartphone became an extension of the urban experience, allowing instant access to information, navigation, and communication. Ride-sharing apps transformed urban transit, while food delivery services brought the city's diverse culinary offerings directly to doorsteps. The tech industry, once concentrated on the West Coast, found a growing foothold in New York, particularly in areas like Silicon Alley in Manhattan, attracting talent and investment. This influx of tech companies further diversified the city's economic base, traditionally dominated by finance, media, and fashion. Yet, this rapid technological advancement also raised questions about digital divides, privacy, and the impact on traditional industries and employment. The city's public spaces continued to be vital arteries of urban life. Parks, from the expansive grandeur of Central Park to the intimate charm of neighborhood green spaces, remained essential havens, offering respite from the urban hum. The High Line, an elevated park built on disused freight rail lines on Manhattan's West Side, became a celebrated example of urban renewal and adaptive reuse, transforming industrial blight into a verdant, meandering pathway, offering unique perspectives of the city. Its success sparked similar projects in cities worldwide, showcasing New York's ongoing influence in urban planning and design. These green spaces, alongside the city's world-class museums, theaters, and music venues, continued to draw millions of visitors annually, cementing New York's status as a global cultural capital. Politically, New York City remained a bastion of progressive ideals, often at odds with national trends. Issues of social justice, environmental sustainability, and economic inequality continued to be central to public discourse. Debates over affordable housing, public transit infrastructure, and climate change adaptation, particularly in the wake of Superstorm Sandy in 2012, which brought devastating flooding to coastal areas of the city, shaped policy and planning. The city's resilience in the face of natural disasters, much like its response to 9/11, underscored its capacity for rapid recovery and adaptation. Historians still debate the long-term impact of these environmental challenges on the city's future growth and infrastructure, and how much of the city's coastal areas might need to be reimagined in the coming decades. The city's diverse population continued to be its greatest strength and its most defining characteristic. Over 800 languages are spoken in New York City, a testament to its unparalleled multiculturalism. This vibrant mix of cultures, traditions, and perspectives fueled the city's creativity, innovation, and dynamic energy. From the bustling markets of Flushing, Queens, to the vibrant street festivals of the Bronx, the city's neighborhoods remained distinct microcosms, each contributing to the larger mosaic. This rich tapestry of humanity fostered a constant exchange of ideas, flavors, and artistic expressions, ensuring that New York remained a place where new trends were born and old traditions found new life. As the second decade of the 21st century drew to a close and the third began, New York City faced new challenges and opportunities. The global pandemic of 2020 brought an unprecedented pause to the city's relentless rhythm, emptying its streets and shuttering many of its beloved institutions. Yet even in this period of profound uncertainty, the city's inherent resilience shone through. Its healthcare workers, essential employees, and ordinary citizens demonstrated extraordinary courage and adaptability. The quiet streets eventually began to stir again, and the familiar hum of urban life slowly returned, albeit with new precautions and considerations. This period, perhaps more than any other in recent memory, forced a collective introspection about the city's vulnerabilities and its enduring strengths. New York City, ever a work in progress, continued to redefine itself. Its skyline, a constantly evolving testament to human ambition, reached ever higher. Its subways, a sprawling subterranean network, continued to carry millions of lives each day. Its parks, its museums, its stages, and its streets remained vibrant arenas of human experience. From the earliest Lenape settlements to the global metropolis of today, the city has been a place of constant transformation, a crucible where diverse cultures, groundbreaking ideas, and relentless energy converge. It remains a city of dreams, a city of challenges, and above all, a city of enduring vitality, forever adapting, forever innovating, forever New York.